Hello, welcome everyone. This is the International Peace Coalition. This is the 123rd consecutive meeting that we've had over the last 2 years, which has been a really wild process bringing people together. My name is Anastasia Battle. I'll be your moderator today, as well as Dennis Small, my co-moderator. And I like to remind people every meeting why we created this forum. And we wanted to bring the entire world peace movement together, despite whatever philosophy you come from, what language you speak, what country, religion, whatever differences that people may have. If you are committed to true peace, if you're committed to truth, then you're welcome here. And we can come to a higher understanding and create the world that we actually wish to see. So thank you, veterans who have been part of this process, to the people who have been part of this for 123 weeks, as well as new people who are joining us for the first time. And please take a moment to share this invitation, whether you're on over YouTube or Zoom or whatever platform you're on where this is being broadcast. Please share it with your organizations, your friends, and reasonable enemies who you think should be part of this process. We definitely have a lot to talk about today. Things are moving very quickly. I'm sure people are very aware of the agreements that have come forward with Israel and Hamas. And we definitely have a lot of discussion to talk about of what the next steps are, especially around making sure that the OASIS plan to create an actual long-term perspective for peace. So to start us off today, we have Helga Zepp-LaRouche, who is the founder of the Schiller Institute and the initiator of the International Peace Coalition. Please go ahead, Helga.
Yes, thank you, Anastasia, and hello to all of you. Well, I think the whole world is relieved about the agreement which has been reached between Israel and the Hamas. And it's a very, very first important step. And according to Gershon Baskin, who was on this program many times and one of the negotiator in this situation, it is the end of the war. Now we have to be absolutely mobilized that it is successful. First steps have been taken. Within 24 hours, Israel is supposed to withdraw behind an agreed line. Then, within 72 hours, Hamas is supposed to release all hostages. And obviously, then very, very urgently, there has to be an immediate reconstruction, the implementation of the Trump 2022 point plan has to occur. But we have basically a whole other perspective about it. Now, we have to be on alert because there are already signs that an international, as a matter of fact, the mobilization of the whole world is needed to make this succeed, because Prime Minister Netanyahu kept talking about a ceasefire and not about the end of the war. This should, be a worrying point. And also the name of Barghouti, who could be the Palestinian president if there would be a vote, was struck from the list. His name was on the list of the prisoners supposed to be released, and then his name was taken out. His wife is in Cairo right now, trying to, do everything possible that his name gets back on, because he would be extremely important for a durable peace solution. So I think that what we have to do in this situation is to really mobilize every force we possibly have internationally to basically put the OASIS development plan on the agenda, because it is not just the reconstruction of Gaza, which obviously is a complete rubble field, but as we have said many times, if you want to have a durable peace, you have to have a vision of development for the entire region, actually the entire territory from India to the Mediterranean, from the Caucasus to the Gulf states, because all of this is desert and there is a glaring lack of fresh water, which would be the precondition for forestry, for agriculture, for infrastructure, for cities. So, since we had already several conferences about it and there is a big support, now is the time to get all the neighbors and big neighbors and small neighbors. Some of them have the means to step in and get such a program invested in, because I think that will be absolutely crucial if we want to have peace. My late husband, Lyndon LaRouche, when the Oslo Accord was agreed upon, immediately said you have to put shovels in the ground so that people start to see that something is moving, that there is a real development, because otherwise the danger is that the hope which now exists can also immediately vanish again. So please join our campaign to put the Oasis plan on the table, and whatever diplomatic or political influence you may have, get this message across to the countries of the region. Because if they would all, for example, if the Arab League, the Gulf Cooperation Organization, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, these are immediately affected states because they're either Arab or Islamic. If they would all now act together and basically propose this to be added to the Trump peace plan, it could actually work. It is the kind of moment where such a change can be implemented. Now, while we are extremely relieved and happy about this development, which I think that is what is the most important, that the dying and the killing ends, this does not mean that the world situation is off the abyss, because in the meantime, the situation around Ukraine is worsening. It has worsened because mainly due to the influence of the so-called coalition of the willing, that is the Europeans who want to prolong the war with Ukraine. It seems that they got a lot of influence on President Trump, who has stated repeatedly that he has made some kind of a decision already to send the Tomahawk cruise missile to Ukraine. Now, that missile has a very long range, and it can only be operated with the technical assistance of the United States, which is why President Putin has said that if the United States delivers the Tomahawk to Ukraine, that would end or destroy the relations between the United States and Russia. Now, this is a very serious matter, because, there are now all kinds of statements being made. Deputy Foreign Minister Ryabkov basically said that the process of anchorage between Trump and Putin has been pretty much exhausted. Now, that would be a tragedy, because that process of trying to normalize the relation was, in my view, the most important, because if you can get the two nuclear superpowers, the two strongest ones, to normalize relations, then that puts the world away from the edge of a thermonuclear war, and therefore it was an extremely the most important strategic development. And it would be tragic if President Trump would, basically go ahead with the Tomahawk, and the peace process or the normalization effort would come to an end. Now, presidential advisor Ushakov a little bit contradicted Ryabkov by saying there are still ongoing discussions between Russia and the United States. Peskov today again said, but these discussions are at a standstill. There are also reports which we have to analyze and evaluate, whereby, for example, Russian expert Gilbert Doktorov basically said that there is a growing opposition against President Putin, because there are circles who think he is too soft in the war. This was strongly opposed by Scott Ritter, who thought that this was not a wise thing to say, or it was also factually untrue. But I think there is definitely, that is my independent assessment in the meantime, there is a military, or there is a growing opposition in Russia of people who think that President Putin is too generous or has been too patient. And I want to say this as a absolute warning to the West, that those people who want to have a regime change in Russia by trying to get rid of President Putin one way or another, they are stupid. They are fools, because they would not get a liberal, they would not get a Navalny, they would get a real hardliner or a whole group of hardliners, and that would not be in their advantage at all. So they should think twice what they are trying to instigate if they do this. Now, I think that the overall situation, I think, must be taken extremely serious, because when you play around with the continuation of the war in Ukraine, which according to all experts is lost already, and you are trying to undo the territorial losses for the Ukrainians, the material losses, the losses in personnel, by putting ever more powerful weapon systems into the situation, which is clearly crossing one red line after the other. And if you conclude out of that that the reason why Putin has not yet responded is a sign of weakness, that is the most foolish assessment you can possibly have, and it's playing with nuclear war. And I think we are only a few, maybe one or maybe a few steps away from such a situation getting out of control. Now, there was yesterday in Berlin an extremely important meeting where the nuclear expert Ted Postol basically gave his assessment of how close we are to nuclear war and what would happen in a nuclear war. And he completely refuted the idea that a tactical nuclear war would be possible, or that you could, quote, win a nuclear war. He described in great detail over a 2-hour excellent presentation that, once you start a war with one nuclear weapon, it is the logic of the difference between nuclear weapon and conventional weapon that all weapons will be used, that within latest in 5 days you will have a global nuclear war, and that is civilization ending. Nobody can win such a war. And I think we have to, we will make sure that this presentation by Professor Postol will get the widest circulation, together naturally with what Professor Starr had already said. But people must wake up to the immediate danger of the existence of the entire human species. And that danger is not overcome until we have a new paradigm in international relations, where geopolitics ends and it is replaced by a system of respect for the sovereignty of all nations, and an end to the idea that one country or a group of countries can dominate over the majority of the world, because that is out, that is no longer existing, and the effort to maintain it can only lead to absolute havoc. Now, unfortunately, that effort is still going on, as we can see in the escalation in the situation in Latin America, where President Trump did not receive the Peace Nobel Prize, which apparently makes him very angry. It was given instead to the Venezuelan opposition person, Machado, who is a woman who, among other things, applauded to the shooting of the boats, through the US. Now, if that is such a peaceful action deserving the Peace Nobel Prize, it escapes me to quite understand that. But that is what happened. And also, there was a coup or a replacement of the Peruvian president, who has been now replaced by the interim president. He has been overthrown de facto. And basically, it is clearly part of what the Army War College representative Evan Allen had said that China has to be basically excluded from any participation in Latin America. What is immediately at stake is the Bioceanic Railway, which is, heavily with Chinese involvement, and also the Chinese involvement in the Shanghai deep sea water port in Peru, which has been built by the Chinese. And it is, I think, part of the new security doctrine of the United States to focus heavily on the Western Hemisphere, which basically means to drive China out and have the showdown with China continuing, which I think has also the potential of leading to a catastrophe, namely global war. And therefore, our efforts to replace all of these geopolitical efforts with a new security and development architecture, which must take into account the interest of every single country on the planet, that effort has to be increased. And I think it is eminently possible because the global majority is already moving in this direction. A new system of respect for the sovereignty of the other social system, basically the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence. That majority is already moving in this direction, and we have to convince the Western countries that the new chapter in the history of mankind can only be a happy one if we succeed to end the idea of colonialism, imperialism, world domination of a few over others, and that we replace that with a system of equals and partnership instead of alliances. So I think we are therefore at a very, very dramatic moment. On the one side, hope and joy over the ending of the war. Now the need to have a massive mobilization to get the Oasis plan on the table. The idea of peace can only happen through development of oil. And at the same time, we definitely have to try to do everything we can to support the continuation of the normalization of the relationship between Russia and the United States, by basically also, organizing everywhere else where we are for a rapprochement and ending this idea of military solutions. In the age of thermonuclear weapons, war is not a way of solving conflicts anymore. And that people have to understand, which is why the presentation of Professor Postol, I would really ask all participants in this call, once we put it out on our website, that you help to distribute it as widely as you can. That's what I wanted to say in the beginning.
Thank you very much, Helga, for that overview of what's going on in the world. And that really does help with the assessment of what people can do and take action right now. I just want to reiterate from the last meeting that we do have the Father Burry statement with a short intro and taking this to various congregations and mosques and synagogues. I'll make sure to post that in the chat. But you can also find it at the schillerinstitute.com website. And then also the Steve Starr video from last week as well. I'll post that in the chat, but it's also available at the Schiller Institute YouTube channel. And then as soon as we have the Ted Postal video, I'll make sure to send that out to people. So we'll continue, but thank you very much, Helga, for that. Next, I'd like to go to Graham Fuller, who is a regular IPC participant and contributor. He's a former U.S. diplomat, CIA official, and an Islamic scholar. And thank you so much for joining us, Graham Fuller. Please, you have the floor.
My pleasure, Anastasia. Thank you. I fully support everything that Helga Zepp-LaRouche has said in this context. I think it's very important. And I'd just like to slightly build on that, or put a little bit of historical perspective against it, that basically we are still trying to come out from under the domination of 500 years, perhaps, of colonialism, and particularly Western colonialism and even settler colonialism. If we look really at the at the end of World War II, in fact, the United States was very successful in being able to use some, indeed, aid to Europe, but more to the point, to install in European capitals leaders who would follow essentially the new Atlanticist line, and which is fundamentally driven by American perspectives. Just to remind people, I'm not sure everybody is aware how vicious it got towards the end of World War II, when just as the Soviet troops had driven back Nazi Germany almost single-handedly all the way across Russia into Eastern Europe, Winston Churchill spoke to American President Harry Truman to tell him that now was the moment for, just after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, now was the moment for the United States to launch nuclear attack against the Soviet Union itself and put an end entirely to the idea of any Russian geopolitical domination and importance in Europe into the future. I mean, this is appalling to think that after being allies, that we would turn on the Soviet Union to do that. In any case, President Truman, in his wisdom, did not do that. But this went on, and it is linked directly into the whole question of Israel and where we now stand with the state of Israel. This again was very much a British-driven plan concept, whereby a new state would be built in Palestine and populated by white European Jews. This was very much part of the British plan, and ultimately the Israeli state was founded. Now, it's commonplace to talk about, well, we're having the Arab-Israeli wars, et cetera, et cetera. But basically, I mean, Israel was viewed certainly by the British and increasingly by the Americans as well as an instrument in Western and American imperial domination in the Middle East. You only have to look at some of the language used back in the day when politicians used to refer to Israel as the unsinkable aircraft carrier for the United States in the Mediterranean that would help dominate the entire region. So I think it's important to recognize and also remember Nikki Haley, who was the former American ambassador to the UN, said during one UN session a few years back that saying, we, the United States, need Israel more than Israel needs us. Well, again, this puts us right in the context of the role of Israel in essentially extending and empowering American domination across the region. And we know what has come of that. So we're still struggling, in effect, with the aftermath of the creation of a settler colonial state whereby white Europeans come and displace native populations of centuries in Palestine. I don't know how we are going to get out from under this. I think the downsides of association with Israel have suddenly become much more prominent in American thinking and even some Western thinking, perhaps over the last, watching the horrors of this genocidal war conducted by Israel in Gaza. That I think it's now harder for people to cling to the idea that Israel is going to be the major American instrument of power across the region. So, as Helga pointed out, this new ceasefire plan, and that's what it is. It's a ceasefire plan. It is not a peace plan. A peace plan may or may not come, but for the moment, it's a ceasefire plan. That's excellent news. At the very least, it means that the massive, brutal killing of Palestinians en masse can hopefully now come to an end. That food and medicine can flow back into Gaza, where the population has been deprived for month after month after month. So that is all very positive. And indeed, it's great that the hostages can be released by the Palestinians. And it's important that many Palestinians prisoners can also be released. But as Helga pointed out, the key Palestinian leader whom Israel has so far refused to release is Marwan Barghouti, who, by all accounts, would be the next president of Palestine in any free elections undertaken. So we should cheer the lives saved by this ceasefire. We hope it will hold. I'm not entirely positive about it because I think Netanyahu's long-term ambitions for Israeli domination of the region and territorial control and ethnic cleansing of Gaza and the West Bank, I'm not sure that it's going to be easily displaced. But let's be happy about the things that we can be happy about, the very positive things for the lives in particular of Palestinians. Now, I've said before and thoroughly support the importance of the Schiller Institute's and Lyndon LaRouche's Oasis plan for some kind of longer range peace in the area. And it's important to note that while LaRouche was struggling in a very different world back 10, 15 years ago with this concept, we now have this remarkable movement of the BRICS and the Belt and Road Initiative all the way across Eurasia that is suddenly now making Eurasia a significant part of what the Middle East can be. It is not just the Gaza or parts of Palestine that need water. The entire area of Central Asia, parts of Iran, huge other areas, the Persian Gulf states, all of these states are water starved. And the initiative, if it can come together, of the BRICS movement and the Belt and Road Initiative tied together with the development of water development, is a huge new plus in the promise, the earlier promise of the LaRouche plan for the water plan. Just let me conclude by saying that I think there's still some major obstacles to peace, both in Ukraine and in the Middle East. I would point the finger again to the British, who I think have been one of the most malevolent, and I hesitate to use the old-fashioned word, but evil force. Excuse me, I'm suffering a throat problem. Evil force in attempting to block peace initiative after peace initiative across Ukraine, and certainly supporting the Americans and supporting Israel completely in what Israel has been up to. I think Europe right now is in a very desperate shape. It has no leadership of any kind, any distinguished kind, and it seems locked into a fixation on the Atlanticist vision, which is rapidly dying. I think the United States itself is finding this finding it something that unimplementable, if you will, as American power weakens across the region in both political and economic and even military terms in some respects. So I don't know how long Europe is going to be caught like a deer in the headlights of Western Americanism and Atlanticism. But obviously, the United States is absolutely dedicated to keeping Europe out of any participation in a new Eurasian formulation, economic, political, geopolitical, not geopolitical, environmental, and other such things. And I hope that Europe is going to come to its senses. It probably will not until we have elections. And it's quite heartening to think, as we see that new elections in Germany, France, and the UK may well bring new leadership to these European states who are no longer tied in to the American plan to put an end to Russian power and influence in the region. As Helga talks about, uh, a win-win solution, and indeed was early on a Chinese formulation and a very valuable one. There's no reason why diplomacy cannot attain win-win solutions. Not everything has to be zero sum in its outcome, although I think America is still stuck on that. I do worry that the United States still cannot conceive of a new world in which it is no longer dominant, but this is the growing reality, and America is almost like a a lion in a cage, in the corner of a cage, that lashes out against any power that tries to approach it or deal with it. And fortunately, we have had. I know I will get in trouble for saying this, but in my opinion, watching Europe and Russian policy for years, I consider that President Putin and his Foreign Minister Lavrov are far and above the most superior foreign policy team anywhere in the world, anywhere in the world, possibly followed by Wang Yi in China. But it's been Putin and Lavrov who I think have been helping drive this, and above all, showing the patience to live with a dangerous America that may be lashing out uh, irrationally to developments in the world. So overall, I am very happy about the new ceasefire. We'll see where it goes. I don't think we can hold back these global world uh, developments, and I think ideas like the Belt and Road and the peace the water plan provide essentially great imagination and inspiration to a world that has almost lost faith in the idea of any aspirations towards development and planning that can bring more genuine peace and welfare towards the region. So in that sense, I'm optimistic. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham, for your contribution. And I'll just say we enjoy having troublemakers on the International Peace Coalition. So you are welcome to cause trouble.
I hope I'm not a troublemaker, but
Oh, well, I do. I do hope that you are.
all right.
Even if you're not trying, you're apparently doing a good job. So,
Okay.
so thank you. So we'll continue. Well, I'm sure we'll be getting questions. I'm already seeing things popping up and I'm getting messages, so people are provoked. We'll continue and then we'll come back for discussion and questions. Next, I'd like to go to Dr. Vincenzo Romanello. He's a nuclear engineer for the Czech Republic, Germany, and Italy, and also the founder of the Atoms for Peace chapter in Italy. So please go ahead, Vincenzo. You have the floor.
Thank you. I will try to share my screen if possible. Let me check. I would like. to share. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So I will speak about the role of advanced nuclear technology in the OASIS plan. This is actually a paper that I made, and I will present a very short overview. I will try to speak slowly in order to simplify the job of interpreters because I know it's very difficult. So, a very quick overview of the OASIS plan. Probably many of you know what is it about. But the OASIS Plan is a visionary initiative aimed at fostering economic development, stability, and peace in the Middle East, and not only Middle East, but also in Northern Africa, as I will show in a moment, through large-scale infrastructure projects, including water desalination, energy production, and agricultural expansion. Key elements to achieving these goals is ensuring a reliable and sustainable and scalable energy source, of course. And for this, what I propose are advanced nuclear technologies, including Generation 4. So this was this plan that was proposed many years ago by Lyndon LaRouche. You see that there were some waterway tunnels and proposed nuclear desalination plants, especially on the coasts and on the rivers. What I tried to do as an engineer was to put numbers and to clarify better this project with time required and costs required, just to have an idea with numbers. What does it mean and how it can be done? So, nuclear energy can play a critical role in addressing these issues, of course, with desalination support, ensuring steady water supply for human consumption and especially for agriculture, energy reliability. Unlike intermittent renewables, we know that nuclear power provides stable baseload supply. Economic development through the establishment of nuclear infrastructure, which fosters technological advancement, of course, high-skilled jobs, and stimulates industrial growth. Now, just as an example to understand what we are speaking about, an advanced nuclear reactor of 1.4 gigawatt today can generate 5.5 billion cubic meters per year of fresh water, just to give you an idea. And then working on these numbers, what I did was to try to establish, this is the map that I prepared working on what we already, on the proposal of Mr. LaRouche. You see there are coastal areas, there are rivers, and the distribution of the population. And then I try to place, this is very rough estimate, of course. There are some red dots, which are the large nuclear plants. There are some green dots, which are the small modular reactors, which should serve to local communities and also as pumping stations. In the paper, there are details. Of course, the OASIS plan calls for the production in the first gas was 100 billion cubic meters per year of fresh water through reverse osmosis or also other technologies in the MENA area, so Middle East and North Africa. Here are the requirements. You see that according to this my rough calculation, we need 19 large nuclear reactors, 6 for water pumping, because of course you have not only to produce water, but also to pump for in the waterways, of course, for a total of 25 nuclear plants. Which is the cost of 25 nuclear plants? It is around 125 billion if we work properly. Construction time for every unit is between 7 and 10 years. But of course, we are not multiplying 25 by 10 because it can be staggered or partially overlapped to optimize timelines and financing, of course. So this was the first idea. And of course, the roll schedule also depends on regulatory approvals, very important, site development, and workforce availability. In the OASIS plan current scenario, I hypothesized 5,000 kilometers of pipelines which connect coastal desalination facilities to water-stressed regions. This is the first guess, of course, should be refined, but this is just the first idea to start to put some numbers. So you see, here I estimated the pipelines, 5,000 kilometers with a cost of 17.5 billions, pumping stations, workforce, 100,000 persons, of which 20,000 for maintenance. Total cost of all this infrastructure would be around $30 billion. How much would it cost in total then? Summarizing, 25 big plants, 125 billion, 30 SMRs, let's say 15 billion. These are reasonable estimates. Water pipeline construction, 30 billion. The same for desalination plants. High-tech plants for brine valorization, 10 billion. Total, 210. But as these are rough estimates, let's round it to $300 billion. This is a conservative estimate, just to have an idea, just to start talking, of course. It's not a final number. It's a lot of money, of course. I understand. But if we assume a political minimal interest rate of 3% over 20 years, this should be an investment of roughly 20 billion per year using standard amortization formula. And although substantial, this figure must be compared with the aggregate military expenditures of the area, which is something around 130 billion annually. So I'm saying practically that only reducing, not removing completely, but reducing the expense for military expenditures by 15%, so 1/7, of this plan in 20 years would become a reality. And the cumulative revenue per year that I evaluated was around 62 and 101 billion per year. So largely enough to repay the expenses. How I obtained this? Here is a table. I will not enter into details, of course, but you can see that there are direct salt sales, chloralkali derivatives, salt-based battery technology, neutron-doped silicon, and solar panel manufacturing, and many other ideas, which can be an important approximate annual revenue, which can repay the costs. So not to be long-winded, coming to conclusions. It is a stark and sad reality today that global powers continue to invest hundreds of billions in war, military aid, and crisis management, and only a fraction of that cost would have the opportunity to invest in the most powerful peace-building tool of all, economic and technological progress, as we said before. And ultimately, the most valuable resource, as I always say, is not water, energy, or minerals in the earth. It's our collective ability to work toward a better future. To us, this plan is an invitation to the world, an opportunity to choose progress over stagnation, cooperation over division, and sustainability over crisis. The OSIS plan is not just a strategy, it's a declaration that peace is built not only with weapons, but with water, energy, and opportunity, mainly opportunity for all, I would say. This is not just a vision for Middle East, it's a model for the whole world. For who is more interested, here is the link to the paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dr. Romanello, for that presentation. And I think we actually should take this presentation as a standalone and use this as part of the proposal. We'll definitely make sure to add it to the OASIS Plan resources page. It's very useful. Thank you so much for this presentation, and I'm sure you probably could go through many hours of of more content if we asked you to. So thank you so much for that. I'd like to actually come back to Helga Zepp-LaRouche for comment on anything thus far, and then we'll get some of the discussion moving.
Well, thank you both, Graham Fuller and Professor Romanello. Let me say that on the cost of the OASIS plan, it pays for itself because, right now this entire region is desert. and desert, the desert is growing and, not very productive. If you put in these kinds of investments, you turn this into a very rich area, of productive economy, of productive people. And, it shows in the history of any investment in real physical economy that the returns are always higher than the credit which goes into it in the first place. And that has something to do with the value added aspect of labor, that the product of your labor is always more than all the parts which go into it in terms of raw materials and time and labor force. There is one very good example, that the Ethiopian government just opened the revolutionary Ethiopia Great Renaissance Dam, which is a project which cost $5 billion. And it was entirely financed by the Ethiopians themselves. They issued bonds to their population, and it was basically financed without foreign help. They calculated that $5 billion, that every year already now, this dam will bring 1 billion profit. So after 5 years, the cost has been, basically done with, compensated. And from then on, it will be pure profit coming in. And that's the character of all such infrastructure projects. So that's just on the economic side, that it is not some unsurmounting big sum, but, compared, as you say, with the military expenditures, it's actually a tiny fragment. But there is another even more important aspect to it. And that is, that people need hope for a better future. Without that hope, it breeds terrorism, it breeds desperation, it breeds crime, it breeds drug addiction, it breeds all of these horrible things. And yesterday at this presentation, Professor Postol was asked, what his explanation was. Why is there no good peace movement? In the 80s, when we had the middle range missile crisis, there were hundreds of thousands of people in the street, and they were demonstrating, and they had a big influence in bringing about the circumstances which led to the INF treaty, because governments eventually had to respond to the fact that the population was convinced that we are on the verge of World War III. So why is that not today, when the actual danger is much, much bigger? And many experts agree that we are in a situation more dangerous than in the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis, but people are not out demonstrating. Why is that? And I think Dr. Postol gave a very interesting explanation, which I want to throw into this discussion for comments, because he said, look, the people who invented the man-made climate change have contributed a lot to that, because if you are now a young person, you are growing up to hear that the world is ending tomorrow because of a climate catastrophe. And, the man-made part of the climate change is actually minuscule as compared to the larger cycles of the solar movement, of the position of the Earth, the ongoing developments on the sun, the effect that has on the cloud formation on the planet. So all of these factors have led over millennia and millennia to cycles of ice ages, warming periods, ice ages, small ice ages, and so forth and so on. But if you're now convinced that it's all man-made and you have to basically not use anything anymore, people think, there is no hope. Then you have the war danger naturally. You have a conviction among the people in Germany, in the United States, that the future generations will be worse off, that nobody will enjoy the living standard the parents had, that young people can never afford to eventually have an own house, so that the world is already ended. And therefore, what should you worry about one more additional problem like in nuclear war? I think that hypothesis is a very valuable one. And I think, therefore, it is so super important to have a perspective of hope, a vision of the future where, everybody can have a better life, and that you can overcome underdevelopment through development, and it will be beneficial for everybody. So I would just like to say that, because I think a vision of a better future is what makes people better. If you don't have such a vision, it makes people worse. So I think that is one extremely important aspect of what we are discussing with the OASIS plan. And I want to thank both of you for your contribution.
Thank you, Helga. I'd like to go to Graham and Vincenzo, if either of you have response, thoughts, questions, comments from the discussion so far. Oh, Graham, you're muted, my friend. Here, I'll prompt you.
There we go.
There we go.
Yeah. No, I am in complete accord with what Helga Zeppler-Roush has said about all of these things. There are military aspects, there are technical aspects, but there are also, and political aspects, but there are also psychological aspects. And indeed, in a place like the Middle East, which has always been known for hopelessness, it is plans like this, and also the beginning of maybe putting an end to the Palestinian Israeli war, the war by Israel against Palestine. This will provide, I hope, psychological hopefulness for the years ahead, and maybe make people a little more willing to try to act creatively towards the future.
Thank you, Graham. Dr. Romanello?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Helga, of course. The basic idea of the Oasis plan is to give an opportunity to all. If you have an area where everybody has a home, comfortable home, a health system, a job, and everything is, and there is enough water, who will lose time with terrorism and with hate? To have hate, war, and every kind of problems, it is necessary to have a poor place where you don't have a health system and you don't have any possibility and any perspective. The idea of the Oasis plan is to invest a tiny part of military expenditures to bring water, to have green areas, and to improve the quality of the life of everybody in the area, because this is the only solution against war and violence. Saying we want peace is nice, but it's not enough. We have to build peace, and we have to know how to do it. And the Oasis plan is one possibility, if good people of goodwill will want to do it.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. Thank you for that. And if there's any other thoughts or comments, please jump in now. Otherwise, we'll continue to the some reports and more discussion. We have lots of questions coming in.
Well,
Okay.
I just would like to ask really all the participants to help, because I mean, we have certain materials. We have the Oasis plan, a 20-minute video by Jason Ross. We have the archived material from several conferences we had from the Schiller Institute, both in person but also online. We have the endorsements of many important international political figures, Palestinian ambassadors from Denmark, from Paris, from UNESCO. We had engineers from many countries endorsing it. We had Dr. Pandor, Lady Pandor, the former foreign minister of South Africa, giving full-hearted support to the Oasis plan. And she said that the Oasis plan is actually in cohesion with the development plan for Africa for 2063. We have also put out an Africa development plan, which we presented at our last Schiller conference in the Berlin conference, which is, it's basically the same basic concept like the Oasis plan. Namely, Africa needs electricity. 600 million people in Africa still have not access to electricity. There will be no industrial development without that. So therefore, to really go in massively to develop those energy resources which can be tapped into directly, like turbines and similar things, but start the construction of nuclear plants right away, because it takes a certain number of years to build them, and at the same time invest in basic infrastructure, an integrated plan of roads, ports, highways, fast train system, waterways, basically a dense infrastructure conception. I mean, you don't have to do all of these things at the same, I mean, you cannot do it all at once. But when you start with a continent-wide plan, where you have a vision, how should the infrastructure look like in 20 years, you can start to build crucial aspects of it, which eventually will all grow into each other and build a network, a coherent network. And you bring development to, now with the Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia, this will help all the neighbors, because Ethiopia can now not only fulfill its own requirements, but it can export to its neighbors. It can be an incentive, eventually to even develop Sudan, which is in one of the worst crises in humanitarian terms in the world right now. But it can also, you can start the Inga Dam, you can start the Transaqua project, and in a few years you would transform the entire continent. And Africa will have, by the year 2050, 1 billion people more than now, 2.5 billion people. And that means we have to build now 1 billion productive jobs in the next 25 years, or else these people will be, in poverty, in hunger. The refugee crisis will become bigger. And if we start now this kind of a development plan, and we have suggested a cooperation between European nations and the BRICS countries, and even inviting the United States as a way, not only it would solve the problem for everybody. It would alleviate the poverty in Africa. It would create an incentive for young people to stay home and help to construct their own country, rather than drowning in the Mediterranean or being pushed back by Frontex and drown then. It would create an incentive for the Europeans, because they need energy. Africa in a few years could be the energy supplier for Europe. So it's a win-win situation, and it would help to overcome the geopolitical conflict. And the United States could go back to the foreign policy of John Quincy Adams, of not chasing monsters abroad, but to build partnerships with republics all over the world. So it is absolutely feasible, but it does require a mobilization of everybody, and everybody can do something. So take these materials, the 20-minute video, the archived material from the conferences on the Oasis plan, and you can contact embassies of the Middle East, of European countries. You can contact faculties in universities, get professors and students involved. You can organize think tanks. You can hold town hall meetings on the plan. If you have a community where you have people from the Islamic world or the Arab world or Israel, you can say, this is a peace plan, let's discuss it, let's build international support for it. And that's what I meant when I said that everybody in the whole world is now asked to make sure that this peace initiative or this peace plan succeeds, because I think it does require such a mobilization.
Thank you, Helga. I've included in the chat the Oasis Plan resources for people to grab, as well as Father Burry's statement. And I see also that Dr. Romanello included his slides, his presentation today, which he posted on his website. And he's got a whole
Actually, the whole paper.
paper. Thank you. Thank you for your correction. The paper that you have posted. And I see on your section on your website, you actually have a section that's titled Peace Through Development. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for posting that and getting this out. It's very important. I see Dennis Small, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a point. The irony of the decision coming from London and Washington to overthrow the Peruvian government of Dina Boluarte as part of the overall plan to make sure that China absolutely has no connection economically to any country in Iberoamerica, which is what's behind it, and also behind the attack on Venezuela, and also behind the recent announcement of $20 billion in a swap line from the United States government to Argentina, to Milei, the condition of which is no ties with China. The irony of this is that by sabotaging China's relationship to Iberoamerica, is that the Trump administration has just vastly worsened the immigration problem in the United States. Because by sabotaging the prospect of development, which is only coming from China, it's certainly not coming from United States forces, this is going to create the conditions of exactly the sort Helga was just describing vis-a-vis Africa, people being driven across the Mediterranean. So perhaps this is a point that could be made clear to people in Washington who are still capable of thought, that this kind of policy is the worst kind of thing for a problem that they themselves claim they're trying to resolve.
Thank you, Dennis. Are there any more comments or ideas before we continue to the report? If not, we'll...
Well, yeah, I would just add to Dennis's point. He's right on the mark. I think if we look the worldwide refugee crisis is wreaking havoc in the United States, in Western Europe and elsewhere, changing governments, bringing in ultra right-wing forces, etc. But there's obviously no wall, no military fence or anything that can prevent this, as the forces of life and death force people in the region to move forward. The only way ahead, and it's obvious and it's implicit in or explicit in what Helga said and Dennis said, is to go to the source of the problem and to make sure that people don't have to leave their homes in order to survive. And finally, if the United States could comfortably replace China's willingness to build huge infrastructure projects, it would be one thing. But the United States is not going to step in, is not going to replace China. So we're essentially blocking these countries from pursuing the kind of economic cooperation with China that they desperately need and are not going to find anywhere else. So in the end, it's highly self-defeating policy.
Thank you, Graham. Okay. Well, I think unless there's anything that's an urgent contribution, I think we can jump to the next part of the agenda. Speak now or forever create peace. Okay, so we'll go to our report. We have Fabiola from Mexico. I'd heard that you had a very successful demonstration in Mexico that you participated in, and it'd be great to hear what you and others on the ground there have been doing. Please go ahead, Fabiola.
Yes, thank you, Anastasia. I am going to briefly tell you about the demonstration we participated in on October 7th in Mexico City. This demonstration was organized by the Pro-Palestinian Platform, and on this occasion, they brought together various social organizations and unions. I think there were around 3,000 of us or more, excuse me. We carried our banner with the Oasis plan, and it has a QR code that links to a video about it in Spanish. Many people took photos of the banner. We marched from downtown Mexico to the US Embassy. And on our megaphone, we played the song Children of Gaza with Spanish lyrics. We also sang the canon Dona Nobis Pacem. We were joined by some young people who belong to the group Musicians for Peace, and they sang the canon with us and the aria Va Pensiero. That was pretty neat. By participating in these marches, what we want to do is to talk to those people who are mobilizing but don't have much to propose, that peace can be sustained if it is backed up by development. That's what the Oasis Plan represents: water, energy, food, and much more for the entire region. In relation to the peace negotiations that were just agreed upon, as LaRouche said, get the shovels in the ground right away so that no one derails the possibility of a true and lasting peace. That's what I wanted to tell you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Those were excellent banners. I am very jealous of your giant banners. Thank you so much for sharing that. And
Sure.
again, it's a great example of the type of work that people can be doing around the world. So thank you for what you and the folks on the ground are doing there. And I want to encourage any other reports during the discussion period from wherever people are. If they have a report on any activities they've been doing, please jump in during the discussion period. Which actually I think we'll be moving to. Let me just double check and make sure there's nothing else that has popped up for me in between then and now. Nope. So we'll continue on to the discussion period. And I see people who are posting questions. They're very eager. We are about to go into that. If you are on Zoom or, I'm sorry, if you are on YouTube, Rumble, X, whatever platform you're on, if you'd like to participate in the Zoom discussion with the panelists and others who are participating, which I believe there's about over 200 people or so between the platform on Zoom and maybe others. If you'd like to jump on, please go to schillerinstitute.com and register right on the top of the webpage. If you go to the registration, IPC registration page, you will get the Zoom link after you register in your email. And with that, Dave, please let me know when we've transitioned.